So I am back. I'm not even going to pretend like this has been a huge break in time. I was excited to finish chapter 19 of Genesis. So I'm just moving right ahead. So this is going to be part 2 of chapter 19. We covered verses 1 through 23, and we're going to pick up at 23 and go all the way to the end down to verse 38. And we're going to wrap up Genesis chapter 19. So again, it's the first book of the Bible, Genesis, and it is chapter 19. We're closing out that final section. We are going to talk about Lot and his daughter. So in the last clip, or the first portion of chapter 19, we went through Sodom and Gomorrah being visited by angels, and there is a determination that the city is going to be destroyed for its wickedness. And so Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters are being brought out by angels, and they go to the city of Zoar. And they are there, and this is how they're going to be protected from being consumed by the destruction that comes. And so we ended off in verse 23, and we're going to pick up right there. It says the sun had risen. So right now we are right at the start of a day. And it says in verse 24 that the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire, or brimstone and fire, out of the heavens. God rained fire down on these 2 cities because of the wickedness that was in the cities. And it says he overthrew those cities and the plains and the inhabitants of the city and what grew on the ground. He destroyed the grass, the trees, the animals, the people, their homes, their properties, the possessions. He overthrew everything. Everything right now is being turned. It's just being burned by fire from heaven. And in verse 26, a lot of us have heard this and seen it. Lot's wife was behind him. They were running out of the city. They get to Zoar. They get to the city, and she is behind him, and she looks back. They were given the instructions to run for their lives, flee to the hills, and do not look back or turn around. And she looks back, and she becomes a pillar of salt. And what I want us to, we talk about looking back, and you don't look back and you don't do this because you don't know what's going. Here's what I'm going to say about this. She was given very specific instructions. And if there is a time where you are given a warning and you are given very specific instructions, anything outside of that, especially if they say don't do it, typically needs to be followed. You should 100% follow the warning that you are given. And she looked back. And there are a lot of reasons that people will like to say she looked back. She was curious. She was wanting to know what it looked like. She had all types of attachments to this town, this city that's being destroyed. She has friends and people and things and places. All her possessions are there. We don't know why she looked back. What we do know is that she did. So what I'm going to caution us is to be obedient to the word of God. Don't decide that looking a little bit won't hurt. Catching it in my peripheral won't hurt. Putting a little, touching it a little bit, doing a little bit. If God has said don't do it, don't do it. Follow the instructions. Be obedient to the word of God. And there is a break there because that is the end of her story. And God has closed off her story right there. Whenever we see somebody who does not have a name, you are welcome to put your name there. I want you to analyze your actions and your ideas. If you are given a warning, if you are given instructions, are you the type of person that's going to follow them explicitly? Or are you going to be like, I just want to know what would have been? Focus on making sure you are obedient to God. In verse 27, it says, Abraham went out early in the morning and stood in the place where he stands before the Lord. He went out to the place where he prays and where he talks to God. And he looks down towards Sodom and Gomorrah. And he knows his nephew lives there. He knows his family is there. And all he sees, the plains and everything, is smoke going up out of the land like smoke from a furnace. He sees just smoke. Everything is destroyed. It is obviously gone. It is not any pieces left. All he sees is smoke, and smoke that's coming up like out of a furnace. It's thick and black. Everything's been consumed. And in verse 29, it says, and it came to pass, or so it was that God destroyed the cities and the plains. He took everything out, and everything that fed into it went. But God remembered Abraham. Abraham had begged and talk to God and bargain with God about saving the righteous while he destroyed the wicked. Do not cut down the righteous while the wicked are there. And you can pray that prayer. If you know that you got somebody that's trying, but they surrounded by a bunch of foolishness, if you are a teacher and you got a kid that goes home to something crazy, but this one got potential, this one has heart, this one wants it. If you are a doctor, a lawyer, anything, if you are in a position where you know that there's somebody that needs to be saved, but you don't have the ability or power to save them, pray and ask God to keep them and restore them and hold on to them, and do not let them be destroyed by the wickedness around them. Your prayers may be the prayers that keep them afloat until they can get to a different environment. And it says that God remembered Abraham. Abraham bargained. He went from 50 to 45 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10. He held God's attention for a long time, trying to make sure that the righteous would be saved. And even while the righteous were being saved, if it was enough righteous, would you save even the wicked? And God was willing to save the wicked for the righteous. So make sure that you are among the righteous. Get your numbers up. Make sure you are righteous and you surround yourself with people that are righteous so you can be part of the saving the wicked. So it says that God remembered Abraham and he sent Lot out. He overthrew the cities where Lot was living, but Lot's life was saved. So when you are that person that is begging and talking to God on behalf of somebody else, God will honor your prayers and remember the things that you asked for and will save even that one kid and the entire family, if that's the one. Sometimes because of that one kid, he'll save the whole family. So don't feel hopeless. Don't feel like there's nothing you could do. Make sure that you are continuing to pray and pull on God and say their names so that God will remember you and remember the prayer and bring that family or that child or that person or whoever through. So in verse 30, Lot leaves Zoar. So he asked the angels and God if he could stay in Zoar because he was worried about staying in the hills. He was afraid. And he leaves that city because he was afraid to stay there. He is a foreigner. He has nothing. Everything he has been destroyed. He left the city with the clothes on his back. And he has left and he is afraid now that he's a foreigner in the city, that this city is not going to be equipped to take care of them, and that this city is going to be destroyed. Because if you destroy two cities and the plains around them, this smoke is everywhere. It is bad news, and he is afraid. So he leaves even that place, thinking that he is going to be so fully consumed because they're running as it's raining fire and brimstone and sulfur down from the heavens. He don't know where it's stopping. He just remembers that the angel said, get to the hills. So he is going to the hills. He's not even going to stay where he asked for permission to stay. He is going directly to the hills. He's playing no games. And so he gets there and he lives in a cave with his daughters. And in verse 31, it says, the firstborn daughter says to the younger one, our father is old and there is not a man on earth. His daughters believed that the entire world was destroyed except for them. They believe, and I'm certain because Abraham and Lot were righteous, that they taught their children Noah. They taught their children how to sacrifice, how to pray, how to do these things. And so his daughters are under the impression that there is nobody left on earth. Okay? We are in the days of Noah and we are going to have to repopulate the earth. There's no man around and he's old. And if we wait until something happens, our father could pass and it'll just be us. And we cannot exist with just the two of us. We have got to have some children around to preserve. We've got to figure out a way to do this. We've got to make more people. And they, in their limited capacity and foolish brains, cook up this plan that they are going to get their father drunk, and they are going to lay down with him, and they are going to make more people. And so that is exactly what happens in verse 32 and 33. The firstborn goes and gets their father drunk, and it says that he did not know when she laid down or when she got up. He was so out of it that he didn't know what happened. And then In 34 and 35, they do it again with the younger daughter. So they are now both pregnant in verse 36. They are both carrying a child from their father, because they are under the impression that they are the last people on earth. There are no men left. There is nothing else we can do. And we are going to take our very limited understanding, our very limited minds, and we're going to take the confusion that came from that area we used to live in. That wickedness that was in the area that they lived in had them thinking all types of crazy things were right when they were in fact wrong. And they were right now trying to take stuff into their own hands. They stepped away. They allowed fear, because that's a scary, traumatic thing. Like, that's terrifying. You are in a town. There is a whole hustle and fight at the door, and there are angels there. You are in your home, and then the angels grab your hands, and you're outside of the city, and then you're running for your life, and your mom looks back and turns into a pillar of salt. And you are still running and don't realize she's not with you because you didn't look back. You did what you were supposed to be doing, and you've lost everything. Everything. We shut down in our own minds, and we lose it ourselves when we have to bury a family member that's close. Like, just losing their mother enough. Losing their mother was enough to be a traumatic experience that would cause them to not be thinking straight. But they lost their home. They lost their fiancés. They lost their possessions. They lost everything. They have no more identity. Their father is afraid of what's going to happen to them. They are living in a cave. They went from wealthy to the point where they had to separate from Abraham and his camp because they had so much. They had an entire city and town. They had a future, and suddenly they are living in a cave with their dad, thinking they're the last humans on earth. That is traumatic enough to make you do some foolish things. Now, just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean that God condoned it. It doesn't mean that God has decided it's okay. So please do not read this and be like, well, in the Bible, they had relationships with their family members. That is not what God told them to do. At no point did God give instructions to say that you're the last people on earth, because they weren't. Had they consulted God and not allowed their fear and trauma to help them make decisions, God would have said, just chill out, friends, let the smoke clear. It's a couple towns over. It's a lot of other people around here. You got a future. Don't even worry about this. It's something else in store for you. But what they did was they allowed their fear to dictate, their trauma to dictate how they think and make decisions. And they got themselves in a very foolish, weird spot. And just because it's in the Bible, it's telling the story of what happened. It's not condoning it. It's not saying that it's acceptable. In verse 37, it says that the firstborn bore a son. She had a baby boy and named him Moab. And he is the ancestors of the Moabites. So clearly at some point, they realize there's other people on earth. And now they have this child that, again, is creating other people and has descendants and has a group of people that are assigned to him as his legacy. The younger has a son, and his name is Ben-Ami, and he is the Ammonites. And so those are his descendants. And what this really comes from is this son got a wife, and they had kids, and they had kids, and they had kids, and that son had kids, and that son had kids, and that son had kids. And so you create this legacy of grandchildren, and they mark themselves as the Moabites and Ammonites because that's the kind of the father of it all. That is the patriarch of this line. So I am going to recap, and I want us to be very, very careful about, again, making sure that we are rightly dividing the word. So we started off in verse 23 for this portion. In verse 23, the sun has risen on the day and it has started, and God rains fire on this city and destroys it. He destroyed Sodom, Gomorrah, and the plains around it. He destroyed everything that Lot had looked at and determined was beautiful and was healthy and was a good place to plant his family. And in the process, Lot loses everything that he had there. He runs and he flees for the hills, and as he is running, his wife looks back and she turns into a pillar of salt. He loses his wife along with everything else he had amassed. He is now in a very, very bad space because he's lost so much because of just where he was. He was just in a wrong environment. He was in the wrong place and lost so much. And what I want us to remember is When you receive a warning or instructions from God, follow the instructions. Do not decide that one little peak won't hurt, one little this won't. Follow the instructions explicitly. Do exactly what you're told and nothing else. The instructions say, don't look back. Don't turn around. Run for the hills. Run for your life. If you are running for your life, you should not be looking back. Looking back slows you down and changes your focus. Looking back has never served well for any person in a scary movie. Do not look back. Keep running. Get out of there. Then after that, Abraham gets up. He goes to the place where he prays and talks to God, and he sees the destruction. And it points out that God remembered Abraham and saved Lot's life. He saved his nephew because Abraham was righteous, because he had taught him the things of God, because he had imparted in him and taken care of him and done what he could for him. And God remembered Abraham and saved Lot. Now, because of everything that's gone on, Lot and his daughters get into the hills. They are living in a cave. So much is going on. These girls think that they are the last humans on earth. They are terrified, and they believe that they are getting ready once their father is old. So if he dies, what happens to us? We need children. We need someone to work with us. We have to create a future somehow. And they each get their father drunk. It says he ain't know when they laid down or when they got up. He was so out of it, he didn't know anything had happened until he recognizes that his daughters are pregnant. And they each have a child. And these children grow up and have their own descendants and legacies. And we're going to talk more about them as we journey our way through the Bible. But I do want to caution you guys, do not allow fear and trauma to decide how you think, to help you make decisions. You need to consult with God. Had they just prayed, had they just said, God, we are in a hopeless situation. We are the only humans on earth. I am certain God have been like, no, you're not. Abraham is still over there. Abraham is right up the hill. Don't even worry. He's a ways away. And don't worry, I only destroyed 2 cities in the plains. I didn't take out the entire world. Make sure that you are adding God to every decision you make and not lean into your own understanding, because your own brain will have you do some crazy things. Your brain is not designed to know the things of God. Your brain is designed to follow the instructions of God. So make sure we are following instructions. Make sure we are taking care of strangers, and make sure that we are consulting God before we make decisions. You guys be blessed.